Let me wait. There we go. All right. It is Wednesday, October 26th. The Digital Roundtable is on. Lots going on in the world. Lots going on in the economy. We have a great guest today. And before we get rolling, we're going to ask our own Dr. John Sibley Butler with the bow tie for some music.
Sometimes when the night calls it a day and I wake up down in this missing you kind of way, I remember things better left forgotten. And sometimes when I'm holding someone new, I can't help myself. I slip off and think of you and remember things better left forgotten.
All right, Johnny.
Very nice.
Well done. Well done. Very nice. Very classy. Very classy. How are you doing, John Butler?
I am fine. I'm working with so many startups now. The most interesting one is my colleague and neighbor, I might add, 3 houses down, that's doing nuclear generation on the small side and in the development for the, to safeguard, quote, the grid. And then, of course, we have another person that's doing Sun, as you know her. So I've been working with those. And the most interesting one was I had 2 guys come over from Baton Rouge with something called Tiger Air, where they rotate air inside of a helmet. And it's being worn by football teams. But what's important is it will also be worn by people who work outside. It's a gorgeous day in Austin, Texas. I woke up sneezing. So obvious the weather has changed. I see that the stock market is coming back. I pick up the paper. It's a lot about affordable housing. That's like trying to get affordable housing in Manhattan, I might add. It's hard to go against the rules of economics as people are trying to do that. And, if you look at the world in general, and there was a big article in the Statesman today about, the grid is still unsafe for the winter. I found that very interesting. So, we've always talked about the fact that the grid itself was never in the political arena. Nobody ever thought about it until the lights went off. So it was interesting to see that article today. And the war is still booming in Europe, unfortunately. But, against that backdrop, people are really traveling. And if you look at the saving rate, it has really gone up. If you look at a lot of the indicators, they are good. Even the stock market, as I said, is coming back. So it's interesting times to be alive. And Austin is very, very interesting because the number of startups and the amount of wealth that's moving to Austin. And as we gotta maintain and solve many of the problems that's evolving with that, from transportation, expanding the airport, to looking at rail. So it's interesting times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me say hello to Trez. Trez, how are you, sir?
Doing really well, and so glad to be here today. Thank you for this invitation and giving me the opportunity to join you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before I introduce you formally, let me do a quick roundup of what's going on in the world. So, interest rates are, climbing up to stop inflation. We have a, bit of a global challenge because, it's no longer the United States managing the United States, but it's everything around us that impacts what's going on internally as well. But the stock market is finally maybe bottomed up a little bit. Everybody had been predicting a recession, this and that. So I think that maybe things are going to taper here, waiting for the elections. Everything will slow down. Elections will take place. If everything happens as it should, division of power, then everything should go back to normal, and the bottom should have been had, and the triple witching will happen here pretty soon in November, and that should be the end of it. In January, things should start climbing up normally back to normal. And the economy in many ways is doing fine. We added another 260,000 jobs in September. Price of gas in Austin is hovering around 312. It was about 308 or 309 last week, but it's climbed up some. Price of barrel of oil is $85. I can tell you that at $85, Midland, Texas is booming and bursting. And it's just, the Texans that are in the oil business are having a great time exporting oil and going wherever they can sell it.
And natural gas now too.
And
Liquefied natural gas, yeah.
Natural gas is through the roof. And so it's really interesting what's going on. At the same time, as you all know, we have all this infusion of federal funding for clean energy, and the opportunities there are incredible. And so anyway, so that's sort of this high level of where we're at. So Tres, a lot of people probably don't know about your company. They definitely know about some of the stuff that you have done, having worked at Microsoft, and you and I have that in common. That was my first company, my alma mater. I did happen to work for the man himself, and so Tres Hill is the Chief Technology Officer of Stealth Power. Love the name. He's going to be with us for about an hour or so. Prior to Stealth Power, he was a software engineer at ARM, one of my favorite companies in the world. He was also the owner of On2 Next, where he was for a while consulting and selling his skills to the world. He was a solutions architect at Crossroads, a senior partner technology manager, and a senior technical product manager at Microsoft. He was also director of storage solutions at Crossroads Systems, a senior software engineer at Uplink Corporation, and a senior software engineer at Crossroads Systems. He holds a BA from Austin College and a BS from the University of Texas. Man, another Longhorn.
Welcome,
That is correct. They're pretty easy to come across here in Austin. You can't swing a stick without, pretty much finding a Longhorn somewhere.
You probably know, Trez, about the API and IC Square and all these things. And our beloved John Butler is the man himself that grew it from being when he was a young man from Northwestern, some 30 some years ago, and helped transform the city of Austin into what it is in so many ways. So
absolutely, let's give some credit to Lauren Kilcrease and Ozzie Barkus and Mesky. But I tell you, Tres, we met with the Macomb School of Business in 1976, maybe, and Drew and Kosmeski drew Austin out, and it looks like that today. It's all came from his eye. And what we did, we put science and technology.
Yes.
Right, management, accounting, and finance.
The whole chip consortium and how to build a tech center, and then you get all the everything builds on that. It's a virtuous cycle of a constant cycle of innovation. That wheel is just continuing to turn. Thanks to
we had Bobby Inman, we had great mayors, and I cannot believe the Austin that we have today, because when I got here, as you know, their only jobs were University of Texas and state jobs. And we had, I guess IBM had just gotten started with the electric typewriter, right? And it was the MacBees, of course, had a company, and it was different. Michael was starting, and he got lucky. He did a great job. In Whole Foods, John Mackey did a great job. National Instruments, which we don't talk about, Jim Tressart did a great job.
Oh my gosh, yes. Applied Materials, all of them. I mean, it's amazing.
And Herb Kelleher also came out of our ecosystem with Southwest Airlines. So it's been quite a run.
Yes, amazing.
So Tres, tell us what is Stealth Power? Yeah, and we're dying to dive into it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, so Stealth Power as a company, our mission is to turn off combustion engines. And so when I meet people and I talk about what we do, that's message number one. We do everything we can to turn off combustion engines, but then to maintain power through hybridization, through lithium battery packs. And one of the big things that's so important is we also do data collection. So we do advanced data collection, and that's so important, and it's a game changer for us. It's helped us to go from a small company to just a rapidly expanding company at this point, with customers like the U.S. military and FDNY, and it's really been just amazing to see that there's been a sea change in the last really year and a half. For a long time, we would call people up and we would say, hey, guess what? You can, that utility truck that's parked out there working on power lines, you can keep the air conditioning on and keep the operator comfortable, but you don't have to run that diesel. You don't have to run the diesel to do it. And for a long time, it was, don't call us, we'll call you. But in the last 18 months, and you talked about it, there's been this, the new legislation, the new, all these things have really taken a turn. Plus, I mean, people are just looking at the world around them and the kinds of storms and just the extremes that we're seeing, in terms of climate. And they really are thinking, what can we do? And what can we do quickly? And that's one of the great things about Stealth Power is we can come into any fleet and we can hybridize it right away. We can, the system pays for itself, relatively quickly, just in fuel savings, but you also get all the environmental savings. You also have a more reliable way of providing climate control. John talked about the helmets. We do that for the cabin of a truck. We do the same thing. We keep people in the cabin of a truck or in a transit van or in any kind of vehicle. We're able to keep them comfortable, save money, and save the planet at the same time.
Well, Tress, let me ask you this. When I look at technology, and I have books on tech transfer and those kind of things, and one of the great things that we had to do is to look at the different sectors. And because each sector had a different kinds of technology. For example, when NASA called and said, we have all of this technology, we need to see which technology is good. In your sector, in your evolving sector of let's get this combustion engine turned off, which is very interesting in itself.
Yes.
How do you evaluate technologies for the future? I would say that there are so many different kinds of types of technologies that's evolving. Some are repeat technologies. How do you yourself or your company do the evaluation of the technology in the sense that it can make money, in the sense it can be taken to the larger society and improve the lives of people?
That's a great question. So in other words, how do you make the decision to pursue, a technology? Well, you got to do your homework. That's thing number one. And honestly, the economics around batteries have just changed so massively, and they continue. It's one of the areas of the greatest innovation currently in technology. Moving to lighter weight, higher density lithium, packs. So we do our whole system in a box now that fits under the rear bench in an F-150. You know what I mean? That wasn't possible. The first system that we did, say back in 2015 or 2016, we were putting lead acid batteries, glass mat, AGM batteries, and we'd put that in a car and the car would just sink, it would just, sink like that. So a big part of it, John, is, you have to track, you have to be aware of what's possible. And some of the great innovations or that have helped us is, of course, the innovations and, of course, the incredible price drop. So the amount of power that you can get, the power to weight ratio for the amount of power you can get out of the density of, of a battery pack, and then the cost per kilowatt hour, of power. All these things are just, and that's the kind of slide you want to be on, right? You want to be on that slide where prices are constantly getting better. The second thing that's been huge for us is the ability to collect data cost effectively from all of our systems using cellular data networks that have become incredibly cost effective for IoT, Internet of Things devices. If you're just trying to send data, JSON data, back to a database, and the other thing is the ability to use Azure and AWS, to use cloud infrastructures. These have been game changers for us in terms of reducing the costs simplifying the solutions, and just making everything better, and smaller and easier to install and
Yes.
easier to track.
Yeah. Speaking of that, it's interesting whether it's flight, when we started flight, or trains, when we had lots of train wrecks. We had flight, we had lots of airplane going down. During the recent storm, the recent hurricane on the East Coast, the battery cars, we won't call the name, the battery cars were literally blowing up in the water. Okay, so all of a sudden, the progress that we've made on my colleagues, I'm sorry you mentioned that F-150. I mean, he, Andrea just lights up. He has a whole deal over the F-150. But it's like any other technology. So let's go back to flight. Okay, as I said, so we had to improve it. And now we know that electric cars, we've always known this, don't like water. They were absolutely blowing up. And then the question becomes, what does it mean for the future? But the question is, what's the future to improve the technology?
Yes,
it's the future of the technology.
that's
so
right.
therefore, nobody would get on an airplane. Nobody ride on a plane. Look, the number of train crashes in the early was off the scale. Well, I think we're getting some of that same effect with battery operated systems, we call them. And if you were to sit with some scientists from battery, we had the Baghdad battery 2,000 years before in Baghdad, right?
Yes.
But if you were to sit with some scientists who specialize in batteries and say, look what happened in South Carolina, look what happened during the flood. The battery cars were burning people's homes down. We have another problem to solve because they were blowing up, well, like combustion engines in a fire.
Mm-hmm. There's no doubt. And so one of the things that I talked about is this energy density. So what you're really just talking about is energy density. You start putting that much energy in a smaller pack, more lightweight, but more power, then you've got to do more. You have to do more to protect it. Let me give you an example. When we were doing lead acid systems, we didn't have to have a BMS, a battery management system for lead acid. We could just kind of watch the voltage, go up and down. But the systems that we have now, John, you have to have data. So Tesla is sitting there monitoring every individual cell, inside those vehicles. And, Tesla puts a SIM card in every single one of their vehicles. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they're constantly sending data. They're sending data about the autopilot, but they're also sending data about the vehicle. And I also think data is what made airlines safer and trains safer and everything like that. You have to know, tracking is so important. So in all of our systems, we have individual thermistors on individual cells. We're tracking individual cell voltages across the entire pack. And this is just what you have to do. So, if you're going to deliver a system that is safe, one quick thing I'll tell you, we do systems for FAA. So you mentioned planes. We do systems for FAA that are installed along the border in South Texas, and they're powered by batteries and solar. And then they also, originally they were just powered by generators, but now they're 90% powered by us alone. And I just wanted to say, not one of our systems went down during the snowpocalypse here in Texas.
Well, you're right. Connectivity is good. I remember I had a 280Z, and Andreas probably had one. I wouldn't drive it when it rained because it would spin. It would literally spin out. It was
too much power. That's another kind of power to weight ratio right there in the vehicle, right?
So, I agree. Well, let me ask I have my tie on for my colleague who was missing. Llewellyn King. Let me ask his before I give you back to Andreas. What is your customer base? What kind of customers do you have? How do you project your customer base? I know that it is changing because everybody is supporting it, but also we know that certain states have stopped investing in companies that's trying to get rid of the combustion engine, like the state of Louisiana, the state of Texas, and they said we're not going to invest in any other companies, that's trying to destroy, quote unquote, the combustion engine. So what's your customer database, and how do you approach the customer, and how do you see the projection of your customer price?
Well, that's a great question. So let me follow up on that. What we really do, we're still using, combustion engines in all of our hybrid systems. So like even those systems that we did for the FAA, they have a generator, but we try to use it as little as possible. And that saves engine hours. So it saves wear and tear. It makes those devices, makes them last longer. I don't mean to, we're really a hybrid, John, we're kind of in the hybrid space. We're not telling you to get rid of it. We're just trying to make what you have, more efficient. And I think that's an important distinction, to make. At the end of the day, also, cost is such a big part of it. I mean, yes, we talked about the price per gallon of, or barrel of going up, which is good for West Texas, Permian Basin, and so on and so forth. But so you asked who our customers are. It's mostly fleets. So fleet, like utility truck fleets are, and they want to. And let me tell you something. I think about this a lot. There are stories of crews, when they lose the air conditioning. You've heard of, hardworking people, who have heat strokes,
Right.
All about the heat.
exactly. And so what we're really about is having more than one way to keep those hardworking people on the front lines, the people out there who go back and put it all back together. John, you were talking about, the floods and hurricanes and everything like that, or water systems going down and and so on. The people who go out on the front lines and they put all that back together again, and so we're trying to take care of those people. So let's say that we can keep them comfortable even when that engine is not running. So it's not just about not having to run the diesel engine if you don't want to. It's about they can be comfortable, like and they can be taken care of. And we do other things like for crews up in the north, like on the border of Canada, we can preheat the vehicle, before they get into the vehicle, so that they're comfortable in the morning too. And so really it comes down, but I will tell you this, what, one of the challenges is it has to be an executive decision, John. It has to come pretty much from the top. Would it surprise you to hear that, like, every fleet manager, they have enough on their plate every day, to keep those, well, nowadays with the chassis shortage and part shortages, fleet managers have enough to do just to keep their vehicles on the road. So honestly, fleet managers are the ones who ultimately deploy and manage our systems, but they sort of have enough on their plate to not have to think about this too much. The thing that's changed is the executive level of engagement. They're like, there are things that we can do right now, to reduce our fuel costs and to provide a better solution to take care of those utility crews, utility trucks, or we do every ambulance in New York City, so paramedics. We do, we've done, police cars too, so that they can be safe and that those lights are on. Could you imagine if the lights go off on a police car and he's parked out in the middle of a highway somewhere? You hear about police officers getting, hit accidentally, on the highway. It's incredibly dangerous. So we're all about really reliably powering, providing the power that these incredibly important people need, to stay comfortable, to have communication, to have their safety equipment on, to have their lights on. And that's who we're really targeting. That's where we believe we can bring real value.
I'm going to introduce you to Jack, who's the CEO of Tiger Air, TIGERAIRE, and they're doing the analog of that, or the same for football players.
Yes,
they're fighting
to keep them
heat.
comfortable and fighting the heat.
Created
Yes,
air-conditioned hats for people, for hard hats, for example.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and there are 5 college football teams now wearing the helmet, and the demand is up. And more importantly, as you said, they will have the relationship between the data going right to the doctor's office, so we can measure. We don't want to have any more heat strokes of kids dying in high school.
Yes.
So I think that the technology is good. Okay, thank you, Andrea. I might have gone too long.
No. This is fabulous.
F-150. I didn't want you to just take over with the
F-150. This is fabulous. So Tres, walk us through any marquee account. Just walk us through how many units, what does it take? Somebody signs up for the for your solution. What does that mean? Walk us through one sale, one success story.
Well, I couldn't be on this call without talking about FDNY. So we do the ambulance for ambulances for FDNY, and we're grateful every day for that opportunity to help those mission critical systems. What's interesting, so let's talk about them, because it's a very interesting case study. Number one, the people in New York made a commitment at the ballot box to reduce the amount of just fumes and emissions, in New York City. So there's a whole initiative that goes all the way up to the mayor's office and the ballot box to say, we really don't want to leave engines just running, on the street in New York City. There was concerns about how, exhaust fumes can impact small children, asthma rates in New York. Anyway, there are all sorts of reasons why, just the ability to turn off, engines is incredibly important. And New York has continued, and it's been across, administrations going back to Mike Bloomberg and all the way up to now. There's been a real consensus to do that.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is that the emergency services, police and fire and things like that, don't have to actually, they're all about the mission. There wasn't an immediate requirement for that, but under the leadership of Commissioner Ehrenberg, he's like, this is what you need. You need a visionary and somebody who really believes that there's a better way to do things. So let me tell you quickly about New York. So they park all of their ambulances on the street. So in New York City, they have stations for the fire trucks, but every day they have a total of about 600. So you asked about numbers. So they've got about 600 ambulances. They are the largest ambulance fleet in the United States by a good margin. And the only way that they can get to people in a reasonable time and provide service is by staging, by placing hundreds of ambulances around New York City every single day. Before we came along, before we were given the opportunity, those ambulances would just park on a street and run their motor. The reason that they have to run their motor is because they have to be ready to go, and they need their computer, and they need their radios, and they need all those critical systems inside that ambulance to be available. If you power cycle a radio, it takes a certain amount of time for it to reinitialize and connect, and during that time, a crew is not available. So and so that was the challenge that we were faced with, and we were given the opportunity to provide the solution for. And we started out using lead acid batteries, and we've continued to evolve that solution more and more and more to try and maximize the amount of time that we can turn off those engines, but still make sure the crew is comfortable, and make sure that all of the critical systems inside that vehicle are up and running. And we do it blinklessly, so without any loss of any power at any time. And then I have to tell you a quick anecdote. One of the things that they told us is that you have to be incredibly reliable. Would it surprise anybody on the call to hear that an ambulance is a very important piece of equipment? And we were immediately told that we had to, not in any way negatively impact, the ability of New York ambulances to operate reliably, consistently, and so on and so forth. So honestly, thanks to that visionary, Commissioner Ehrenberg, we were given the opportunity to provide that solution. And that really set the DNA of who we are as a company, that we're about the crews, we're about crew comfort, we're about reliability, we're about, taking care of the people that take care of us, right? First responders and everything like that. But at the same time, not putting out, diesel emissions, onto a row, where elementary school kids are walking by a park, heading, and they don't need to walk past an engine that you don't, if it doesn't need to be on, let's turn it off, so.
Let me ask you this. I think, and you have communities that's front New York City, but I also think that in the aggregate that the diesel truck driver was one of the first to do this.
Yes.
That is, you could drive up to a truck stop and everybody had their diesels going because it was hot and they wanted their air conditioning. All of a sudden, the diesel, all of the truck stops said, okay, you can hook up to this, turn your engine off, and still have the same effect of the air. So,
That's exactly
I don't
right.
know, but in terms of the history of the technology, I think that the boys and girls that's driving the diesel trucks have been doing that. My question is, how would your market look like in the aggregate? That is, where people aggregate to leave their vehicles on. Is it just truck stops? Is it also airliners? I mean,
Oh, it's so much. So
yeah,
let's
let's
talk
talk
about,
about the aggregation of your. And, oh,
yeah.
by the way, I'm not going to charge for my consulting because
Thank
Andrea
you.
already
No,
did.
no, it's most appreciated. No, so yeah, so we do recreational vehicles is another area where there's just great innovation happening right now. And you know how big the RV market has been. I think it boomed like never before, during
Yes,
COVID. And so
agreed.
that's another great place where people don't want to run generators all the time.
Right.
And so we've been booming in the RV space. Utility trucks, they've been just huge as well, for us. And of course, our bread and butter, or our DNA, was established in emergency response, vehicles, but we also, a tremendous example is paratransit vans. Almost every city has, paratransit vans. And how important is that, to transport medically, people with medical conditions? They have to have their air conditioning. They have to be kept comfortable. But those vehicles are parked a lot.
Right.
And so that's one of our best solutions is paratransit vans and things like that. And you're right, truckers can kind of choose where they where they stop. They go to a truck stop, like you said, and the truck stops realized, hey, yeah, maybe we shouldn't be, maybe we should let them turn on. And then also trucks, there's a lot of innovation there too, with, they call them APUs. They're putting battery packs and things in 18 wheelers now too, so that people can pull off and run off of that. There's great innovation happening here. And then what's really the big change is that the battery packs are getting big enough that you can actually replace a generator, for example, in an RV, or you can replace a generator in a service truck. You can, and then what we do too, by the way, we support Shoreline. So the ambulances in New York have a Shoreline connection. So they can actually charge up the battery pack overnight so that you get that much extra, off time, during the day. So John, once again, you're 100% correct, and we
Right.
appreciate your
Yeah.
consulting services on that. But
Andreas wants
yeah.
to take his Ford 150. Well, Andreas, why don't you tell him what you're going to do before we have to bail you out of jail?
Yeah, I tell people I came up with this vehicle to grid use case in 2003 when we were dreaming up the future of energy. And I was at Austin Energy at the time. And when Ford Motor Company announced the F-150 Lightning, it was music to my ears, because amazingly so, nobody else has wanted to do this until then. I suspect now that there will be follow-ups to it. But my use case of the Lightning is I'm gonna buy one. I already put a deposit for it. I'm waiting to be told when I'm gonna get one. And so I'm gonna go charge it at the university for free, because they won't charge me energy for it, because I'm building a 64 megawatt solar farm there. So
Nice.
I'll charge it for free there, and then I'll bring it home and I'll run my house from it. So I won't pay electricity to Pedernales Electric Co-op, because I'm running it my house from my truck. So that's what John likes me to talk about as a very disruptive business model.
Yeah. Well, you should give me a call after this conference call. We do we have some innovations, for doing charging, with solar, that I'd love to tell you with. I think we can extend what you're doing with that Lightning.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant.
think,
Well,
yeah.
the other thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to put solar on a new horse barn that we built that is off grid right now.
Oh, well,
It's,
I have to tell you, I have a favorite solar company. They're called Merlin Solar. If you get a chance to look them up, their solar panels look like yoga mats. They're flexible,
oh,
and
really?
yeah, and you apply them with an adhesive, and so for example, they can curve, and they also, here in Texas, we get these hailstorms,
Right, right.
like
Golf
quite
ball.
large.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly strong and resilient.
Hmm.
They're just incredibly efficient. It's really, anyway, if I suppose I'm doing a pitch now, but we do a
I
lot.
would, I would follow up with you on that. You know, and as you know, I run Texas State Cedar, the Connected Infrastructure Consortium there at the
Yes,
university, and we are, looking for all kinds of technologies to showcase in our labs, and
I would love to. So we need to follow up on that. And then the other thing is everything we do is connected.
that's right.
We put a
That's
SIM
right.
card and we put it, and that's the difference between wondering if a system is doing what it's supposed to be doing and actually knowing
Right.
if a
Right.
system is doing what it's
Right.
supposed to be doing.
Now
And
let's
John,
talk.
and that's another big part of safety. I just have to say that real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to have it for safety.
Oh, yeah.
I consider a SIM card. I consider a SIM card in a power system
Mhm.
a safety feature.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
airplane. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think resiliency is the key word going forward.
Yeah.
In all these mission critical infrastructure components as they go connected and then autonomous or self-healing, right?
Yes.
It's really where you want to be, so that the humans don't have to worry about the machines and the machines can take care of themselves, kind of thing.
Yes.
Let's talk software for a moment. So there's a question about, are you guys using blockchain or not? Or what are your thoughts about blockchain?
I we're not currently we're not currently using blockchain, which is basic, but I will tell you that I spend a lot of time thinking about trust. And
Mhm.
trust is a thing that you have to have, that you have to maintain. There can be no weak links,
That's
so I
right.
do spend a lot of time thinking about trust and how do you deal with that. So for example, our systems turn on securely. We use certificates at
Mhm.
every layer. We use as SSL, secure socket,
Mhm.
it's actually called TLS, transport layer security.
Yep.
We don't, all of the data that we send from our systems, nothing is sent in the clear.
Mhm.
And the other thing is the interesting thing is we put a cellular chipset in every one of our systems, and we need to protect that data, because a cellular chipset can receive GPS if
Right.
only if you connect the GPS antenna, so you don't necessarily have to get GPS,
Mhm.
but there's all sorts of data. And I think it's very important, I like that blockchain word because, or just, and just in general, I think of security in terms of chains that cannot be interrupted or broken in any, from the time the system first turns on to whenever it's sending the data, to
Mhm.
when it turns off. And it's something that every CTO needs to spend time thinking about, like, is my data safe?
Mhm.
Am I protecting the data for my customers?
Yeah.
Just the same way
Now
that I would want my data. Yeah.
And
let's
also, Trace, what it does is it lays everybody knows what everybody else is doing. What it does is you're playing poker and everybody can look at everybody's hands, and that's where the trust comes in. And
Yes,
that's where people go back and forth on the relationship between trust and doing the blockchain. So what it
that's
does
right.
is as the data go in, of course it goes in blocks, but as it goes in, then everybody put their coins on the table, turn them upside down, and we know exactly where we are. So therefore you can build trust that way too. You're right.
That's true. Just like we talked about data, something happened. There's a ledger. I completely agree with that. So I'm all about transparency. I'm quite passionate about data. I believe, and The Economist has done whole articles about, the importance of, data, like the new oil, like mining data. And
Sure.
I'll tell you something else. You find out things that you wouldn't otherwise know. We found out with some of the systems that we originally deployed, we gave drivers the opportunity to override the system by pressing, the foot brake and other things. And
Hmm.
we found out, wow, they were overriding it a lot. Yeah, yeah, you know what I mean? Or things like that. Just, it's never quite what you expect. It's always fascinating to get real data because it
Yeah.
really surprised me. When I was at Microsoft, they added instrumentation for Windows, and they learned so much about the performance of Windows because they put in that instrumentation layer.
Right.
And I'll never forget that from that time that I was there. It really struck me. So they were guessing like how to tweak performance in Windows, but no, guessing doesn't work. So they actually bought a whole company called Winternals, Sysinternals, a whole company that did, this monitoring and instrumentation. And Windows has been, Microsoft's been a better company, and Windows has been a better operating system ever since.
Well, as an old professor, I'm going to give you, I'm not going to charge you tuition. I'm going to give you some data. In the 1840s, a person by the name of August Comte created a discipline called social physics. Okay. And so social physics was designed to do, but there was no big data. But theoretically, it was designed to do what we can do now. We could write the equation for the movement of people, because like in physics, we've never seen gravity, but we know that it has an effect. And of course, in social physics, we've never seen a norm or value, but it has an effect. Social physics was changed to the name of sociology. And then sociology became just associated with statistics. So actually what we call big data and what we call data mining, if you go back and read a book by August Comte called Social Physics, or if you go read Penland's book from MIT called Social Physics, you'll understand that theoretically, we are just getting where we were as was suggested in the 1840s by August Comte. So I'm going to sign that to you since you like data. So, but it's
I will. I've taken the mental note.
Point of view, look at social physics, and it's the science of looking at writing equations about all the data that we have that's outside of the physical sciences.
Amazing. And what a revolution that's helped to bring about as well. Yes, right. I'm in complete agreement. Complete agreement.
So Trez, let's keep talking a few other things about software. So I take it that your solution is all hosted in the cloud?
Well, we run embedded firmware on the actual device that we place, in the power system itself. So we use ARM. So, I worked for ARM, and we use ARM Cortex, mostly Cortex M processors, in the embedded systems that we do. So these systems are used to control relays, for switching between charging and discharging. Also the relays are used to control when the vehicle stops or starts, or when the generator stops or starts. So a lot of it's relay control. So we have, true embedded, real-time, systems, RTOS level systems that we run inside are those systems. But then those systems we also implement based on my experience from working at ARM in the ISG group, was, how do we then securely connect those systems to services in the cloud? And there's a lot of ways of doing that these days. I could start throwing around a lot of, terms, in terms of what is the, how do we get the data securely? How do we make sure that, lots and lots of devices are online and operating correctly? There's just been huge innovation, or huge level of innovation in those areas. And so then once we securely get the data into the cloud, we put it into a relational database service. So we run RDS, like I said, on Azure. I was with Microsoft. Part of me is always going to have a little bit of blue, from that time. I noticed you're still wearing your Microsoft blue there, Andres. But anyway, so we get it into a relational database service, and at that point, then we deliver the information that we need using web services. So we run web applications. We use to show dashboards. So we do a custom dashboard. We do dashboards for the city of New York. We also generate reports that go to the mayor's office in New York, about our system, and so on and so forth. So once we securely get it up, get all the data out of the all the embedded devices, then it goes, yes, and then we use cloud services, everything securely. We use certificates. So every dashboard has its own certificate. We use certificates for the transfer of data. So anyway, we do everything securely. We follow best practices. We're using containers, so a lot of our web applications are running in containers, so that we can scale them, and we use load balancers and other things to make sure that we're getting the necessary performance, and so on and so forth. We use authentication services. We use, Active Directory authentication services, or Auth0, OAuth authentication services to control who has access, to the data. So, we can, based on who the person is, we can decide what they can see, like if they can see the whole fleet, or if they can just see one vehicle or one system. So we do that all based on role-based access controls. Yeah.
And how much, a little deeper on software, how much of what you're doing leverages or it will leverage, or what's your vision once you have hundreds of millions of fleets using machine learning, artificial intelligence?
Oh, I'm so glad you did ask about that. Let me give you an example. We do a lot of utility trucks or service trucks, let's call them that. And some of them have extra equipment, like, a bucket truck has a whole hydraulic system, to lift and move. Other systems have compressors, and we work with some of the best compressor companies in the world. One of them that we really like is called Van Air. But in any case, what's amazing, you want to be able to track the information about those systems. You want to know the working, and then this is where artificial intelligence, machine learning. I'll give you an example. We were doing a thing where we were tracking, some compressors, and of course it's a big motor that's running, and if you just put an accelerometer, just as an example, kind of a machine learning, if you just put an accelerometer, sorry, on something that that's moving, then it has sort of its normal way of vibrating, it like a compressor, when it turns on, it does these things. What's really fascinating to me, and this is from my time at ARM, we were working with TensorFlow and other frameworks, so that we could do pattern recognition. So you can do basic kind of, and you can train, the algorithm to kind of, look. You can also just do, is there a statistical analysis? Is there a difference? Like, it has the rate at which it's moving changed in some way, or has the axis changed in some way? Accelerometers are extremely useful for that kind of thing. But then, can we diagnose when something's going wrong, within a motor? Like, and it doesn't matter if it's a motor that's driving a compressor or a motor that's driving a hydraulic, pump for a system. So much of everything is driven by electric motors. So many things are driven by electric motors, and so just having insights into how an electric motor is performing in a given environment, is huge. I mean, or another example, the FDNY ambulances have a leveling system, a very advanced, system for keeping the ambulance, level. And then you can do diagnostics like, is it really level? Is it sagging under different conditions? And that's, you can do that like with the 3D gyroscopic accelerometer, which is an accelerometer, but also, gives you your orientation. And these things, that's really the amazing bits of technology, is that you can put these sensors, which are becoming much more cost effective. That's another one of those amazing technology curves, things getting better, faster, cheaper. And so with sensors, it's amazing what you can do. And to see, and then to help people know, like, or maybe even if there's just a leak in a hose, like if an air compressor will just keep turning on and on and on if you run it, and there's a leak, and it's just, and that's something that you can detect, is when the motor turns on to, so, and this brings real value, and this is something that, we haven't been able to provide that level of detail, for example, about these kinds of vehicles in the past. And I think that's just a game changer across the board.
Well, let me ask you this. We talk about smart cities here at CMG, and how do you connect? I like it because you're connecting the everyday needs of people to the city. I think that is, I could go to New York City and say, look, here's the deal. You're really becoming a smart city now, and you are a smart city, and we would like to have a portion somewhere in the city where the city could actually go look at all of your data, to look at and so when they run for political office, they can say, we now a smart city. And because we have all of the everything connected, we have all of the data. Have you tried to interact with the political process to show why cities need this? And
that's so interesting. This wouldn't have happened
years ago.
Well, what's interesting, John, is this wouldn't have happened without the people of New York voting. You know what I mean? They passed ballot box initiatives to make the air in New York City better, and then those initiatives reported all the way up to the mayor's office. And you're right, the mayor's office tracks it. So let me tell you a story about Mayor Bloomberg. I remember there was a sign that's, you would go in, and it said, "In God we trust. Everyone else must bring data." Right? And so what you need to know is New York, I think, is really pretty far ahead on, on that. They know that, and in fact, you can't do anything in New York pretty much without saying, without tracking it. And that was one thing at Microsoft with, with Bill Gates. Andres, you kind of mentioned it before. Bill Gates would say the same thing, and he does the same thing now in his philanthropy. It's like you tell him what you're going to do or what you want to go do, and then nothing will happen unless you can also tell him or anyone how you're going to measure success. Is it working or is it not working? And in the past, people go, yeah, let's try it, see what happens, and maybe no. When you, this is very important. When you walk in with whatever you're trying to do, with however you're doing it, you need to tell, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I'm going to measure success. This is how I'm going to know what happened or it didn't happen. The days of hoping, or guessing, that things are going to work. That's not even, those days are long past.
Okay.
Right.
Good. Well, I think it's very exciting. I think the next thing to do, I'm old enough to remember the dumb computer, right? And and the big computer that we hooked up when everything was on the big computer, right? So
Yes.
as we go forward with the software, it's going to be interesting to see, what we call the business side of the software, where we'll always be in the cloud, where people come back and say, wait a minute, the cloud does not make business sense anymore. So I started at Northwestern, with the dumb computer, right? And we hooked up to the mainframe, right? And we had no software in the dumb computer, and everything that we did was on the mainframe.
Yeah.
And that became cost efficient. But what you keep an eye on for all enterprises, as the cloud just continues to grow, which to me is just a big mainframe, right? Then people would say, well, we don't know how cost efficient this should be. As a matter of fact, we think we should bring all of the data back to the personal computer. So what we're doing now, we're uploading things from the personal computer so it could be more secure, so that when workers leave their computer right in the airport, then nobody could get to the data. So how do you see the business model for what you're doing in the software in the future? You think that we will always use the cloud? You think it would become less efficient to use the cloud, and maybe everybody would do their own personal cloud in their own office? How do you see that?
That's a great question. I know that there's always going to be like actual devices like computers and things, that we carry with us. And these have to be secure, and these we're going to interact directly. And then everybody needs to think about what we are sharing. In some ways, I think Europe's done a lot better job of thinking about all the data that gets shared. You know what I mean? They have much more, they've put a lot more thought into, what is private data, what is, maybe you should ask people if it's okay, what's okay to share, and maybe you should tell them, what you're sharing. And so I feel like we're getting to a better awareness of all that. The old joke, if people aren't charging you for services, like mapping and all these other things, if they're not charging you for products and things that you're using, you're the product. Yeah. You're the thing, you know what I mean? So like, you're the thing that they're then using, right? And so, or you're providing it. They're doing it because there's value, in what we do. And I think, John, everybody needs to be aware, of those kinds of things. I'm amazed though, like at how easy it is for us to just do a new dashboard for a new customer and make it secure and make it useful. That's incredible. I remember having an Exchange server in a closet somewhere, like to do email for your company, and that, that you don't have to do that anymore. You have to do a lot of other things now to make sure your email is safe because it's all online. But you don't have to, put it in a closet somewhere and make sure that the power's on 24/7 or, things like that. So there's gonna have to be a balance. You know what I mean? I do think we can't. I mean, what are the growth rates now? I think Microsoft announced that they're down a little bit, but a down quarter is 30% a quarter in terms of growth. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So this is pretty powerful stuff. And tell me real quick to wrap it up, Tres.
Yeah.
Does 5G and fiber help your business? Does electrification of vehicles help your business?
So all cellular, yes. So that's interesting. I'll just wrap up with this. Yeah, all cellular innovations help our business. If it becomes more cost effective and more reliable to get data, that just helps our our business, 100%.
Mhm.
And electrification too. We're actually starting to provide. Everybody needs auxiliary power, even if you have an electric vehicle. So like Andres, some people are going to have an F-150, but they're still going to want to run a compressor and other things off it. So they're going to
Right.
want auxiliary power for that too. So we see this business continuing well into the future.
Oh yeah. There are 280 million registered cars in the US. You're fine.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine. All right.
It's gonna be a
Cool.
long time. I know
So
you gotta go.
I
know
do.
you
I'm
gotta
getting
go.
pinged
And we appreciate you very much. Thank you for being with us today. Very exciting. Let's do a follow-up of the things that we
Absolutely.
talked about, and we'll have you over again. Johnny, anything else?
That's it. You know, like I said, just like the sun over the mountaintop. You know, I'll always come again.
Thank you, Johnny.
Nice.
Thank you, Tres.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Walt.
y'all take